Hello, hello, hello. So, I am just opening this to protect myself and saying everything here is under the fair use. We're using this for educational purposes. Please don't take my video down. Just reading some good books here. All right, let's hop into it. Okay, so where was I? Okay, I had to start this over again because I messed something up. But we get to start from the good part anyway. Okay, so his answer was imperter, and as he spoke that word, a spark of intelligence seemed to shine in his eyes, and his tone indicated that this imperter, whoever he might be, was undoubtedly someone to whom this dwarf rendered implicit obedience. I attempted to ask him more questions and to find out who this imperter was or where he lived, but all my efforts were to no avail. Uh, and the dwarf merely grinned and repeated the words he had already said. Therefore, I finally decided to go with him and see how the adventure would end. The dwarf walked ahead, and I followed him toward the base of the inaccessible mountain. While walking, my guide often turned back to see whether I was following him, so I had a good opportunity to study his dress and features. He wasn't over 3 foot high and evidently a hunchback. His clothing consisted of a hooded brown gown, which made him appear like a small Capuchin monk of the order of St. Augustine. An immense big head and a comparatively large body rested upon very thin and small legs, while his feet seemed again to be extraordinarily large. Perhaps because of his small size and the healthy color of his face, he seemed to be almost a child, but this opinion was contradicted by the gray beard of considerable length adorning his face. He carried a staff made of a tree limb, which he had evidently picked up on his way. And then we have meeting the Lord of Shambhala. I followed my companion, and soon we regained the path running along the bed of the creek, which flowed tranquilly over the white pebbles, and the shallowness of the water indicated that we were not far from its source. As we approached the mysterious mountain, the stone walls appeared to rise perpendicularly before us, and there were no was no place visible where any other but being but a bird, and there was no place visible where any other being but a bird could have ascended. However, as we came nearer, I noticed a rent or beat or break in the break in the side of the wall, opening like a cave or tunnel. This tunnel we entered, and I saw it penetrated the giant wall and led into another valley beyond. A few steps brought us to the other end of the tunnel, and an exclamation of joy and surprise escaped my lips as I beheld a beautiful sight. Before me was a valley surrounded by mountains of evidently inaccessible height, where nature and art seemed to have combined to endow it with an almost super-terrestrial beauty. Like a vast ocean bay, it opened before my sight, closing in the distance with a natural amphitheater. It was covered with short grass and planted with maple trees, and on all sides there were forests and groves, small lakes and lovely creeks. Immediately in front of me, but still at a considerable distance, rose the vault of a sublime mountain peak into the blue ether of space, presenting a cavity with overhanging rocks, looking like the hollow space under a gigantic wave which had been petrified by some magic spell. The sides of the mountain sank in energetically drawn lines toward a lower declivity and then rose up abruptly into an imposing height. In the presence of so much sublimity, I became silent, awestruck. My companion seemed to comprehend my feelings, for he too stood still and laughed, as if pleased to see how full of admiration I was. The surrounding stillness would have been complete if it had not been for the noise of a cataract. At a distance to the left, falling over a steep precipice and appearing like a string of fluid silver backed by the dark gray rock, the monotonous rush of that fall contradistinction to the surrounding stillness seemed like a rush of the river of time in the realm of eternity. Another world that the one to which I was accustomed to seemed to have descended upon me. The air seemed pure, the light more ethereal, the grass greener than on the other side of the tunnel. Here seemed to be the valley of peace, the paradise of happiness and content. Looking toward the peak in the distance, I noticed what seemed to be a palace, a fortress, or a monastery of some kind, and I came nearer. I saw it was a massive stone building. Its high walls rose above the surrounding treetops, and a dome-like temple crowned the top of the building. Its exterior appearance indicated the solidity, solidity of the walls. It was built in rectangle form, but its architecture wasn't of rectangular style. It presented many projecting windows, tunnels, balconies, and verdanas. On the side of the valley, nature was less sublime and inspiring. Gray giant cliffs standing out prominently against the steel blue background of the sky rose up to an extraordinary height. Below the highest peaks, long strips of white clouds had settled around the mountains and seemed to separate the top of the latter from its main body. The part below the cloud was partly covered by the shadow and partly illuminated by pale ghostly light, producing a glamour. There were there where the masses of clouds rested against the bulk of the mountain. It seemed that I was looking into a world of destruction, as if the mountain's entrails had been torn up, and the uniformity of the desolate jumble of rocks was only interrupted by a few remnants of snow situated in the caverns and on the crags of the mountain. As we advanced, we came into a broad avenue leading to the building, and I beheld a man of noble and imposing appearance approaching. He was clad in a yellow robe, his head covered with black flowing hair, and he walked with an elastic step. When my guide saw this man, he hurried toward him, prostrated himself before him, and suddenly vanished like an image from a dream. I was astonished by this extraordinary occurrence, but didn't have time to reflect, for the stranger approached me and bid me welcome. He appeared to be about 35 years of age, of tall and commanding stature, and his mild, benevolent look, full of spiritual energy, seemed to penetrate my soul, or seemed to penetrate my whole being and read my innermost thoughts. Surely, I thought, this man is an adept. Yes, answered the stranger, as if reading my thoughts. You have fallen into the hands of adepts, of whom you have thought so much and whose acquaintance you often desired to make, and I will introduce you to into our temple and make you acquainted with some of our brothers of the golden and rosy cross. I scanned his face, and now it seemed this man wasn't a stranger. There was something so familiar about him, as if I had known him for years, yet I couldn't place him in my memory. In vain I tortured my brain to find out when or where I had met this man, or at least someone resembling him. But again, the emperor of this Rosicrucian society, for he proved to be, answered my unspoken thought by saying, "You are right, we are not strangers, for I have often been in your presence and stood by your side, although you didn't see me. I have directed the flow of ideas which streamed into your brain while you elaborated on them and put them down in writing. Moreover, you have often visited this place while your physical body was sleeping, and you have conversed with the brothers and me. Still, when your soul returned into its house of flesh and blood, it couldn't impress the memory of the brain with the recollection of the events through which you had passed, and you could remember none of your transcendental experiences when you awoke. The memory of the material form retains only the impressions made upon it by the avenues of external senses. The memory of the spirit awakens when we are in the spiritual state. I told the emperor that I considered this day to be the happiest day of my life, and I only regretted that I shouldn't be permitted to remain here forever, as I felt it was as I felt I wasn't yet worthy of remaining in the society of beings so far exalted above my own state. We shall not permit you to go away very soon, answered the master. You will have ample time to see how we live. But as to your permanently remaining here, this is at present an impossibility. You have other duties to perform, and moreover, there are still too many of the lower and animal elements adhering to your constitution and forming a part of yourself. They couldn't resist the long destructive influence of the pure and spiritual air of this place. And as you haven't yet a sufficient amount of truly spiritual elements in your organism to render it firm and strong, you would, by remaining here, soon become weak and waste away like a person in a state of consumption. You would become miserable instead of happy. You would die. Master, I said, then can I at least hope to learn while I am here the mystery of those great spiritual powers which you possess, by which you are said to be able to transform one thing into another and transmute base metals into gold? There is nothing mysterious or wonderful about it, my friend, said the Emperor. Such things are not more wonderful than the ordinary phenomena of nature which we see every day. They are only mysterious to those whose own prejudices and misconceptions hinder them from seeing the truth and knowing the power of the spirit possesses to subjugate matter through the soul. We need not be surprised about them more than seeing the moon revolve around the earth or watching the growth of a tree. It's all merely the effect of that one primordial power called the will that brought the world into existence. It manifests itself in various ways, and on the seven different planes of existence, as a mechanical force or as a spiritual power. But it is always the same divine primordial power of will acting through the instrumentality of the organism of human beings who direct it by their intelligence. Then I said, the principal requirement would be to learn how to strengthen the will. Not so, said the Emperor. The will is the law, the universal power holding together the worlds in space and causing the revolutions of the planets. It pervades and penetrates everything and doesn't require your strengthening it, for it is already strong enough to accomplish everything possible. You are only an instrument through which this universal power may act and manifest, and you may experience the fullest extent of its strength if you don't attempt to oppose it. But if you imagine you have a will of your own whose model of action differs from the universal will, you merely pervert an insignificant part of the latter and oppose it to the greater original power. The more you imagine having such a will of your own, the more you will come into conflict with the original willpower of the universe. As you are only an insignificant part of the latter, you will be overwhelmed and bring on your own destruction. Your will can only act powerfully if it remains identical to the will of the universal spirit. Your will is the strongest if you have no will of your own, but remain in all things obedient to the law. Then I said, how can we accomplish anything if we can do nothing through the power of our own will? We may as well never attempt to do anything, but wait until nature performs her work without our aid. We can accomplish nothing useful, answered the master, by attempting to employ any separate will of our own, but we may employ our reason and intelligence to guide and conduct the already existing universal willpower in nature, which constitutes the life of all things, and thus we may accomplish in a few moments certain things which would require unconscious nature much longer periods to accomplish without our aid. The miller who employs the water of a river to set the mill in motion doesn't create the water nor attempts to make the river run upward toward its source. The miller merely leads the stream into certain channels and intelligently uses the existing current to accomplish their purpose. Knowing the law of nature, they act in accordance with it. Being obedient to that law, the miller can employ it. Nature obeys those who act in obedience to her laws. In the same manner act the adepts. They guide the existing spiritual power by their intelligence and thereby caused it to accomplish certain things in accordance with the law of nature. Human intelligence is perhaps the only thing which we may properly call our own, and the highest intelligence to which we may possibly aspire is the perception and understanding of the universal truth. Do you see yonder cloud which has settled below the mountain top? Continued the adept. It will remain there until some current of air blows it away or until a change of temperature causes it to rise or fall. If we disperse it by causing the universal forces of nature to act upon the dense masses, we don't act against the law of nature, but guide it with our intelligence. While the master spoke these words, he extended his hand toward the mountain top, below where the clouds had collected, and immediately it seemed as if life had been infused into the dense mass. It began to whirl and dance and finally rose like a column of smoke to the top of the mountain, ascending from there high up into the air, giving the mountain the appearance of a volcano. At last it collected again, far above the top in the air, forming a little silvery cloud through which the sunshine streamed. I wondered at this manifestation of life in a cloud, but the adept reading my thoughts said, life is universal and everywhere. It is identical to the will. It is not a product of human beings, nor can it be monopolized by them. They receive a certain amount of it when they enter the world. Nature supplies them with it and lends it to them, and they must return it to her again when they exit the world. Only one that has succeeded in fixing a certain amount of the life principle within their permanent inner self may call that life their own and retain it after their physical death. During our conversation, we slowly approached the building, and I had an opportunity to examine its exterior in all its details. It was only 2 stories high, but the room seemed lofty. It was built in a quadra, quadrangular form and surrounded by oaks and maple trees and a large garden or park. 7 steps of white marble led up to the mountain, led up to the main portal, which was protected by 2 massive pillars of granite, and over the door appeared in golden letters an inscription saying, "You who enter here, leave all evil thoughts behind." We entered through the portal into a large vestibule paved with flagstones. Amid this room, a statue of Gautama Buddha on a pedestal, and the walls were ornamented with golden inscriptions. Okay, hold on. I'm going to take a sip of water. So, if you don't know, Gautama Buddha is who is who Guatemala is named after. So Guatemala, its entire foundation is actually Buddhism, and it's not talked about enough because it is a historical fact that Gautama Buddha, one of like the first Buddhas, that is all of that stuff happened in Guatemala and in the Americas. So when you see that name, just know that story, and I highly recommend looking up more about that very interesting stuff. Oh yeah, so the walls were ornamented with golden inscriptions representing some of the most important doctrines of the ancient sages. To the right and left, doors opened into long corridors leading into the various apartments of the brothers. The door opposite the entrance led into a beautiful garden where I beheld many plants and trees, usually only found in tropical climes. The back of the garden was formed by a building of white marble, surrounded by the dome I had seen from a distance after entering the tunnel. And on the top of the dome was a silver dragon resting on a golden globe. "This," said the emperor, "is the sanctuary of our temple. In this you cannot enter. If you were to attempt it, the immediate death of your personality would be the consequence. Nor would it serve you even if you were able to enter and live. For in that sanctuary, everything is dark to all who don't bring with them their own spiritual light, the inextinguishable lamp of divine intelligence to illuminate the darkness." We walked into the corridors, On our left were numerous doors leading to the brothers' cells or apartments, but to the right was a wall occasionally opening into the tropical garden. The interstices between these openings were filled with beautifully painted landscapes. One of these landscapes represented an Indian scene with the white snow covered Himalayas in the background, while the foreground of the picture represented what appeared to be a Chinese pagoda with a small lake and wooded hills at a distance. These pictures, the master explained, represent the various monasteries or lamaseries of our order. The one before you is situated near a lake in the interior of Tibet and is occupied by some of the highest adepts of our order. Each of these pictures also shows a part of the country where the monastery is located to give a correct idea of the general character of the locality. But these pictures have an occult quality which will become apparent to you if you concentrate your mind upon some part of the picture. Okay, I'll pause right here. So, what this part of the book is really cool because I personally, before I ever read this book, I've had this experience with artwork where you focus your third eye on it and more things are revealed to you. Personally, I have mostly started, of course, doing this through psychedelics. There are some very, very gifted people. I'm sure they can do it without them. But also, you practice these things enough on psychedelics, you can actually make these things stick. But I have noticed on psychedelics, and again, I have all this on cosmicqueer.com. I have more details on this. If you are to focus on certain images, like and kind of like meditate a little with your third eye, certain types of artwork will spring to life and others won't. There are like different qualities to the art. I can't tell you exactly what they are, but I have noticed one thing for sure is that if you, with intention while you are drawing something in a psychedelic and meditative state, uh, I personally drew kind of like a sacred geometry type of image. I can't even really explain it here. I'll try to see if maybe I can drop it in the video or something. I probably won't. But I've drawn something like that and other things before where you draw it in that state. And then when you are in that state, if you like focus your third eye and do a little meditation on the image, you will watch that image come to life fully. It's very wild. I even have like a photograph of myself that was taken like by my girlfriend in like this really like beautiful beach. And anytime I'm on acid, if I look at that picture and give myself a minute, focus my breath, and start to like purposely view through my third eye and kind of lift my view, suddenly the image fully comes to life. Like this picture of me just like standing on the beach suddenly turns into a picture of me traveling around the world and I'm walking through the mountains and all this stuff. And it's a very wild experience and it's like so amazing and it's very hard to put it properly into words, uh, kind of what is happening, but I do have all this stuff on my website, and I on that specifically, I have directions and like stuff where you can try it yourself. Like I'm not saying I'm like some super guru master or anything. I absolutely anything I can do, you can do, and probably could do it better if you practice more than me. And that's just how it is. Uh, but great stuff, highly recommended. The world is so much more interesting and beautiful than you realize once you can start properly viewing things through the third eye. Okay, let me have a little bit of water. Oh, and once again, so let's do a little shout out to some of my favorite people on YouTube: Karamio Ahua, DJ Wolf, and 432 The Drop. They've got some great interesting stuff, especially DJ Wolf has amazing stuff that's recorded in 432. Great songs, great mixes that he's putting out. Go listen to his stuff. He needs some more attention on him, and they're great stuff. It's not just spa music, it's very, very great music. And the other two people are doing great work in the realm of Black history and all of that stuff. And they've inspired me, among some other people as well. Uh, they've inspired me to make videos, and a lot of people and a lot of other content creators have inspired me because I love all the stuff that people are doing about history of the Khans, of the Black people, of the Amaru Khans. But I also think it's very important for the community, for every community, for our human, family, to have uh, people doing just as in-depth work and research into the spirituality side. And I'm working, on being like a better researcher and stuff. But I know how to read. So that's what I've been working on right now. Is just reading and bookmarking great, interesting stuff and following the, great people that are doing a work like this and trying to learn as much as I can to do that kind of stuff because I did not go to college for that kind of stuff. So the hardcore research doesn't come as easy to me, but finding great, interesting, old, nonfiction books does come easy to me, so that's where we have this. Um, Hold on, I've worn myself out talking. Let me just pause for a second. All right. This is. Oh yeah, I apologize about me having to move my face all around the screen. I probably should have picked like a different program, but we'll work on that. This is how it is for right now. Okay, so I did as I directed and concentrated on the grand portal of the lamasery. To my astonishment, the door opened and a tall Indian man dressed in shining white robes with a turban of pale yellow silk stepped out of the door. I immediately recognized him as one of the Tibetan adepts I had seen in my waking dreams. He too seemed to recognize me and and smiling nodded while I bowed reverentially before him. A fine looking horse was brought by some attendant, which he mounted and rode away. I was speechless, but the emperor smiled and drew me away, quoting a passage of Shakespeare with a little modification. For he said, "There are many things in heaven and earth which your philosophers don't understand." We passed on to another picture of Egyptian scenery with a convent in the foreground and the pyramids at a distance. It was gloomier than the former, but probably because of the surrounding desert. The next picture represented a similar building in a tropical and mountainous country, and the adept told me that it was somewhere in the Cordilleras of South America. Another one showed Mohammedan temple with minarets and the half moon upon their tops. I was surprised to see all the various religious systems in the world represented in these Rosicrucian orders, for I had always believed that the Rosicrucians were an eminently Christian order. The Emperor, again reading my thoughts, corrected my mistake. The name Rosicrucian Order, or the Order of the Golden and Rosy Cross, he said, is a comparatively modern invention and was first used by Joanne Valentine Andre, uh, who invented the story of the knight Christian Rosicruz for the same purpose as Cervantes invented his Don Quixote de la Mancha, named to ridicule the would-be adepts, reformers and gold makers of his age. When he wrote uh, his celebrated Fama Fraternales, before his pamphlet appeared, the name Rosicrucian didn't mean a person belonging to a certain organized society of that name. It was a generic name given to all occultists, adepts, alchemists, or anybody who was or pretended to have some occult knowledge and acquainted with the secret signification of the rose and the cross, the symbols which have been adopted by the Christian Church, which were, however, not invented by it, but used by all occultists thousands of years before Christianity was known. These symbols don't belong exclusively to the Christian Church, nor can they be monopolized by it. They are as free as the air for anyone who can grasp their meaning. Unfortunately, very few Christians know that meaning. They only worship the external forms and know nothing about the living principle which those forms represent. Then I said, someone who is spiritually enlightened may become a member of your order, even if they don't believe in any of the so called Christian dogmas. To this the Imperator answered, no one can become a member of our exalted order whose knowledge is merely based upon dogmas, belief, creeds, or opinions which have been taught to them by somebody or which they have accepted from hearsay or from the reading of books. Such imaginary knowledge is not real. We can know nothing real except what we realize within ourselves, because we feel, see, and understand it. That which is usually called knowledge is merely a matter of memory. We may store innumerable things in our memory, and they may be true or false, but even if they are true, they don't convey real knowledge. Real knowledge cannot be imparted by one person to another. Someone can be only guided to the place where they may obtain it. But they must grasp the truth for themselves, not merely intellectually, but with their brains, but also intuitionally with their hearts. To obtain real knowledge, we must feel the truth of a thing, understand that it is true, and know why it cannot be otherwise. To believe in the truth of anything without having real knowledge of its truth is merely a superstition, and therefore all of your scientific, philosophical, and theological speculations are based upon superstition and not real knowledge. The science and knowledge of your modern philosophers and theologians are continually in danger of being overthrown by some new discovery which won't amalgamate with their artificial systems, because the latter are built upon sensual perceptions and logical argumentation. The truth cannot be overthrown. It needs no argumentation. And if it is once perceived by the spiritual power of perception and understood by the spiritual intelligence of human beings, it conveys real knowledge to the latter and cannot be disputed away. Our order has therefore nothing to do with creeds or beliefs or opinions of any kind. We care nothing for them. We want only real knowledge. If it were all sufficiently perfect to recognize all truths by direct perception, we should not need any books or instruments. We should not need to use logic or do any experiments. But if we were in such a state of perfection, we should not be here. We should be in nirvana. As it is, we are still beings, although far above the intellectual animal usually called human, and it hasn't been regenerated. We still use our books and have a library to study thinkers' opinions. Still, we never accept such books or opinions, even if they came from Buddha, as our infallible guides, unless they receive the seal from our reason and understanding. We venerate them and use them. They serve us, but we do not serve them. During this conversation, we walked into the library, where thousands of books were standing on many shelves. I noticed many ancient books which I had heard of but never seen. There were the Sublime books, which are said to have been destroyed by fire, the books of Hermes Trismegistus, of which only one is believed to exist, and many others of priceless value for the antiquary or the student of Hermetic philosophy. While I wondered how the brothers came into possession of such treasures, the Emperor said, "Well, may you be surprised how we came into possession of books which are no longer supposed to exist. But the secret of this is that everything, and consequentially every book which ever existed, leaves its imperishable impression in the astral light, and that by certain occult means these impressions may be reproduced from that universal storehouse, the memory of nature, and be put in a visible, tangible, and material shape. Some of our brothers are great to some of our brothers are to a great extent engaged in making such reproductions, and thus we have, without any financial expenses, obtained these treasures which no amount of money could have procured." I rejoiced to hear these words, because they confirmed my opinion that life in solitude wasn't necessarily a life of uselessness, and that ideas are real things which may be seen and grasped far more easily in a tranquil place then, surrounded by the turmoil and petty cares of life and society. In answer to this thought, the emperor said, "Our monastery was founded by spiritually enlightened people who had the same thought which I read in your mind. They therefore selected this spot in a secluded valley whose existence is known only to a few, and by making use of certain elementary forces of nature which are as yet unknown to you. They created an illusion which renders this place safe against all unwelcome intruders. Here those and welcome the germ of divinity, being latent or dormant in the heart of everyone, has awakened and activity may find the conditions required for its further development. Here we live in peace, separated from the outer world by an impassable barrier, for even its existence was known. For even if its existence was known, it would be an easy matter to create other illusions to prevent intrusion. We are, however, not excluded from that outer world, although we never enter with our physical forms. By exercising our clairvoyant and clairaudient powers, we may at any moment know what is going on. And if we desire to come into personal contact with it, we have our physical forms and go out in our astral bodies. We leave our physical forms and go out in our astral bodies. We visit whomsoever we wish and witness everything without our presence being perceived. We witness the state person, the minister, the philosopher, and the inventor. We infuse thoughts in their minds which are useful, and they don't know from whence those thoughts come. If their prejudices and predilections are very strong, they may reject those thoughts, but if they are reasonable and know how to discriminate, they will follow the silent advice and profit by it. In that case, I said, your order can exercise a tremendous influence on the world's politics. So why don't why didn't you try to abolish some of the greatest evils that have afflicted the world? Why did you permit such monsters as Nero and Caligula to exist? And why did you permit the horrors of the why did you permit the horrors of the Inquisition? Why did you allow the terrors of the French Revolution? Why didn't you destroy villains such as Louis V of France and others of that class? Uh, to this, the adept answered, there is a certain law of justice which we need to observe, because its action is of the exponent for the evolution of the race. Although people may perceive as evil those consequences which they cause. As the surgeon sometimes has to inflict pain to remove a cancerous growth and save the patient's life, it is often necessary to purge the organism of a nation to to restore its health. It is said that the evils are blessing in disguise, and that God may execute his purpose through the instruments available at his disposal. Nevertheless, I said, it seems to me that you might interfere in individual cases to protect people from committing acts of imprudence which will cause them to suffer. To this he replied, it is true that by setting a great amount of willpower into motion, we might handle humankind as if they were mere automata, and we could cause them to do what we please, while they would still imagine that they were following their own inclination. But to do so would be against the rules of our order and against the great law. For the latter decides that each person shall be the creator of their own karma. We are permitted to advise people, but we are not permitted to interfere with their freedom. Still, I persisted. There are innocent people who have to suffer for others' actions. There were martyrs who underwent torture and death for the sake of some great cause. Why didn't you save them? Why did you permit Hypatia to be torn to pieces by a fanatical mob, or Joan of Arc to die in an ignominious death upon the stake? Such people will have their reward. From the blood of a martyr springs fruit in abundance. Their bodily sufferings are nothing in comparison with the joy they earn. Nothing is useless. Although you narrow-sighted mortals cannot always see the use of the thing, Moreover, it often happens that worthy people are saved in a manner appearing to you miraculous. A strong desire to become a member of the Rosicrucian Society entered my mind, but I didn't dare express it. The master, however, reading my mind, continued to say, "We accept in our circle everyone who has the necessary qualifications to enter, no matter to what religious belief they may have adhered, before obtaining true knowledge. But you will perceive that these qualifications are not in everybody's possession. They cannot be conferred by favor, and it is a well known saying, even among the lowest grades of occultists, that the adept cannot be made, that they must grow to become one." "Master," I said, "would it not be well for those who desire to develop spirituality and to become adepts to imitate your example and to select some, some secluded place where they could reside undisturbed and give their time into meditation and concentration of thought? There are a great many people in various parts of the world, belonging to various nationalities and creeds, who have become convinced that the conditions under which the majority of our present civilization live are not conducive to the quick attainment of higher spiritual state. They believe the objects which they usually strive to attain during their comparatively short lives upon this globe, such as the gratification of pride and ambition, the hoarding of money, the enjoyment of sexual love, the obtaining of bodily comfort and pleasure, etc., cannot be the true objects of life, but that our present life is only one of the many phases of our eternal existence, and that terrestrial life is only a means to an end, namely to afford the conditions by which the divine element, germinally contained in everyone, may grow and develop, whereby we may attain a higher life like yours, which isn't subject to transformation and death, and is therefore of permanent value." The adept who had patiently listened to my outburst smiled and said, "If those people have advanced so far as to be able to bear a life of seclusion, then let them enter it. But to do so, it is above all necessary that they possess some real knowledge. Only those who possess such knowledge will be able to live harmoniously together. As long as humanity moves merely on the plane of beliefs and opinion, each person's opinions and taste will differ from those of others to a certain extent. And I'm afraid that your proposed harmonious society would prove in the end to be a very inharmonious one, and not at all conducive to that tranquility necessary for interior concentration. I have, however, no doubt that even under such unfavorable auspices that hold up, that considerable advantage might be derived from the establishment of the theosophical monasteries in secluded places. If you had any colleges, seminaries, schools, or societies where the truth could be taught without all the accompanying rubbish of scientific and theological misconceptions and superstitions which have accumulated through the ages, great progress would undoubtedly be made. As the present civilization now stands, there are two education methods. One utilizes what is called science, the other what is called religion. As far as science is concerned, the deductions and speculations are based on observation and logic. The logic may be good enough, but the powers of observation upon the fundamentals of its logic rest are restricted to the very imperfect faculties of sensual perception, and therefore your science is based entirely upon external illusions, and is consequentially a superficial and elusive science. Uh, an elusive science, knowing nothing about the inner life, which is far more important than external phenomenon. Scientific doctrines regarding the fundamental laws of nature are wrong, and therefore all of the deductions are wrong as soon as it leaves the plane of illusions. You must not misunderstand me, he continued, seeing that I didn't fully grasp the meaning of his words. I don't mean to say that your modern science knows nothing about the external appearances of things. It knows what it sees and understands, but not the being able but not being able to see anything except external and sensual phenomena. Science only knows of external effects. It knows little or nothing about invisible causes which produce such visible effects, and as soon as it attempts to speculate about them, it errs, because causes are not the consequences of their effects, but the consequences of still more interior and fundamental causes of which modern science knows absolutely nothing, and which therefore cannot serve as a basis from which to draw logical conclusions concerning their ultimate effects. Science knows a great deal about the little details of existence, which are the ultimate effects of the actions of universal life, but knows nothing about the tree of life, the internal source from which all these transient phenomena spring. As far as your modern theology is concerned, it is based upon an entire misconception of terms originally intended to signify certain spiritual powers of which your priests and lay people can have no correct conception because they haven't the spiritual powers necessary to conceive of such things. They dispute with each other about the qualities of certain principles, while neither the one nor the other party knows anything whatever about the object of their disputation. Being narrow minded, the universal principles and powers which are active within the great workshop of nature have in their conceptions become narrowed down to personal and limited beings. The divine and infinite power which humans call God, which exists everywhere with, and without which nothing can possibly exist, has been reduced in the minds of the ignorant to an extra cosmic deity of some kind who can be persuaded by mortals to change his will, and who needs substitutes and deputies upon this earth to execute his divine laws. Your religion isn't the religion of the living God who still lives and executes his own will. It is the religion of a dead and potent God who died long ago and left an army of clergy to rule in his stead. Therefore, your modern religions are systems of superstition from which the truth has been excluded. The infinite God who deposed from his eternal throne into the hearts of men and women and infallible mortal priests have been put in his place. Love has departed and fear rules humanity. Each individual seeks his or her happiness and forgets the existence of others. Each wants to be saved at the expense of another. Each wants to obtain a reward they haven't merited. All to think that to live is the object of life. And few realize the fact that life can have only one reasonable object, namely to benefit humanity. It can only hope to live eternally by obtaining the power to live not in their perishable self, but in the spiritual element of humanity. Your theology should, above all, be based upon the power of spirituality to perceive the truth. But where can you find a minister who has any spiritual preconceptions and dares to trust their own intuition more than the dogmas prescribed by their church? If they dared to have their own opinion and assert it, they would cease to be a minister of the church and would be considered a heretic. In your intellectual age, everything is left to intellectual investigation alone. Little is done to develop the intuitive power of the heart. The consequence is that your present generation is like people looking at everything through a telescope. They may see, but they do not feel what they see to grasp the truth. The consequence is an entirely false conception of nature and humankind. Humans are neither more nor less than a living organism or instrument through which the universal one life acts. In so far, they are merely intellectual animals, but the human organization, especially the brain, is far superior to that of animals and therefore enabled to become an instrument for manifesting the highest principle in the universe, the principle of divine wisdom. The instrument or organism through which the divine principle acts in and through humans from within outward upon the external world is the organism of the soul. In this organism, the universal and undifferentiated divine spirit finds the soil to grow in an individualized form. It finds the stimulus for its development and the food from which it may draw its strength. Oh yeah. So that was most of the first chapter, in my opinion. All of the good parts, if you were, coming to a video where I'm not reading the entire book, because I'm not reading the entire book. But I think that is a great intro. And now I'm going to hit a couple of my bookmarks from this book because I think this is a great book, and I've heard a few different things about this whole concept of Shambhala, but I have never read something so in depth, and I fully believe her telling of the story and stuff. Okay, so my first bookmark is page 76. And I don't know if she said that in this book or if I read it in one of her other books, but she says, uh, or no, I think this is another book, but apparently with these like super secret magical, societies that are like literally in a mountain and protected by magic kind of shit. Apparently, like there's this whole rule where they'll have like every, I think, 900 years, the seven, like I guess most noble people on Earth are allowed to come visit, and they'll like call out to them, which I don't know, sounds pretty cool. Okay, I am back. I tried to pause it for a second. I messed it up a little bit. You will hear that weird silence, but here we go. Oh, you can hear the coyotes going already because it is very dark out, even though it is 2 p.m. I think I'm going to sneeze. Okay. Okay, so where we are now, these are my bookmarks from this book that I think are very interesting, that explain, I think, very interesting and like high level spiritual concept in like a very nice way that you don't get to hear addressed very often, or very many, spiritual writers and stuff of today talking at this level. All right, so let's just dive in. Okay. But I said, didn't the ancient alchemist? All right, let me adjust my seat, sit up straight, get the flow going. All right. But I said, didn't the ancient alchemists treat real metals and transform them into others of a higher order? To this, Theodorus replied, and we realized there's a part in the book that you guys didn't get to see because I skipped over it, where we realized the emperor's name is Theodorus. Um, he replies, "The invisible principles of which the constitution of a human is made up are called metals because they are more lasting and enduring than flesh and blood. The metals formed by thoughts and desires will continue to exist after the perishing elements constituting the physical body have been dissolved. A human's animal principles are the base metals of which their animal organization consists. They must be changed into nobler metals by transforming their vices into virtue until they pass through all the colors and turn into the gold of pure spirituality. To accomplish this, the grossest uh, elements in their form must die and so putrefy so that light of the spirit penetrates through the hard shell and calls the inner human into life and activity. Then I said, All those alchemical prescriptions which we find in the books are only to be taken figuratively and have nothing to do with the material substances such as salt, sulfur, mercury, etc. Not exactly so, answered the adept. No hard lines separate the various kingdoms in nature, and the actions of laws manifested into one kingdom find their analogies in other kingdoms. The processes taking place in the spiritual planes are also taking place in the astral and material planes. Subject, of course, to such modifications are imposed by the conditions existing upon these planes. Nature isn't, as your scientist sees them to believe, an uh, amalgam or a agglomeration of fundamentally different objects and elements. Nature is whole, and everything in the organism acts and is acted on by every other thing contained therein. This is a fact that the ancient alchemists knew, and which the modern chemists would do well to remember. For we find already in the book of Zohar the following passage, which I advise you to note down in your book so that you don't forget it. Everything that exists upon the earth has its ethereal counterpart above the earth. That is to say, in the inner realm. And there is nothing, however insignificant it may appear in the world, which is not depending on something higher or more interior. So that if the lower part acts, it is presiding, the higher part reacts upon it. The microcosm of human is a true counterpart, image, and representation of the great macrocosm of nature. In the former are contained all the powers, principles, forces, essences, and substances which are contained within the latter, from the supreme and divine spiritual principle called God down to the grossest state of the universal one life, in which it is called matter. Those principles may be latent or active in either of the two organisms. They may exist merely germinally in a form, or they may be in a developed state. As it has been taught by the ancients, I said, that a human is a little world constituted like the big world in which they inhabit. This is true, said the adept, but you should not merely know it as a theory, but realize it. Within yourself is contained the universe with all its powers, heaven and hell, angels and devils, and all the kingdoms with their inhabitants, and you may call on them into your life at your pleasure. You are the God and creator within your own universe. You continually people that world with forms coming into existence by your thoughts, and you infuse them with your life by the power of will. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. You continually people that world with forms coming into existence by your thoughts, and you infuse them with that life by the power of will. In each human being are contained germinally the essences which constitute the mineral, vegetable, animal, or human kingdom. In each human are contained principles which may be developed into a tiger, a snake, a hog, a dragon, a sage, or a villain, into an angel or a devil, into an adept or a god. Those elements which are made to grow and to be developed will become human and constitute their self. Look at the double interlaced triangle over your head. It represents the macrocosm with all the forces, the interpenetration and union of spirit and matter. Within the never ending circle of eternity, look at the smaller symbol upon the table before you. It represents the same elements within the constitution of human. If you can bring the double interlaced triangles existing within your own self into exact harmony with those existing in the universe, your powers will be the powers of nature, and you will be able to guide and control by your reason and will the process the pro- by your reason and will the processes unconsciously taking place within the realm of the latter. I thought of the nature of the many different ingredients necessary to do an alchemical experiment. experiment and how they must be fixed, but Theodorus perceived my thought and replied, the universal process by which all the life processes take place is the principle of life. Those who can guide and control the power of life to do their will are alchemists. They can create new forms and increase the substance of those forms. The chemist creates nothing new. They merely form new combinations of the substance in their possession. The alchemist causes the substance to attract corresponding elements from the invisible storehouse in nature and to increase. The alchemist deals with matter in which the principle of life is inactive, that is, in which it manifests itself merely as mechanical or chemical energy. The alchemist deals with the principle of life and causes living forms to come into existence. The chemist may transform sulfur into invisible gas and cause that gas to become sulfur again, and the sulfur obtained at the end of the experiment will be just as much in quantity as if it was at the beginning. Still, the gardener who puts the seed in the ground and prepares the conditions necessary for that seed to grow into a tree is an alchemist because they call something into existence which didn't exist, ready made in the seed. Out of one seed, they may thus obtain 1,000 seeds of the same kind. But, I exclaimed, it is said that the Rosicrucians possessed a power to turn iron, silver, or mercury into gold. Surely there is no gold in pure silver or mercury. How then could they cause something to grow which didn't exist? The adept smiled and said, it is as if through your lips speaks the learned ignorance of your modern civilization, which can't see the truth because it has created a mountain of misconceptions and scientific prejudices which now stand in between itself and the truth. Let me tell you once more that nature is a unity, and that consequentially each particle of matter, even the smallest, is a part of nature in which the possibilities of the whole are hidden. Each speck of dust may enter under favorable conditions, developed into a universe where all the elements existing in nature can be found. The reason why your scientists are unable to comprehend this truth is that their fundamental doctrines about the constitution of matter and energy are entirely wrong. Your dualism in theology has been the cause of untold misery, creating a continual quarrel between God and the devil. Your polytheism in science blinds the eyes and obstructs the judgment of the learned and keeps them in ignorance. What do you know about the attributes of primordial matter? What do you know about the difference between matter and force? All of the so-called simple substances known to your sciences originally grown out of primordial matter. But this primordial matter is a unity. It is not. It is only one. Consequentially, each particle of this primordial matter must be able to grow under certain conditions into gold, under other conditions to produce iron, under others mercury, etc. This is what the ancient alchemists meant when they said each of the seven metals contains seeds of the other seven. They also taught that to transmute one body into another, the body must be transmuted. The body to be transmuted would have to be first reduced into its prima materia. But, he continued, I see that you are anxious to have the truth of these doctrines demonstrated by an experiment. Let us then see whether it is possible to make gold grow out of its seed. Okay, so I'll go on in a second, but this, in case you don't understand, uh, they are pretty much just saying that like everything is made out of the same stuff, and you can make essentially anything from any one thing because at the base they are all the same. So within within iron you could make gold from from anything that is a thing. You could make everything because at its base we are all made out of the same stuff. Okay, so this goes into the next chapter. So I'll stop here, but I will go into our next bookmark. because I thought that was great. Or wait, I didn't mean to bookmark this. Oh yeah, so we did this one. Or wait, no, I've already. Okay, I am making myself look dumb right now. All right, 93. Okay, if the water becomes muddy, the reflection sees altogether. Likewise, if the mind is in a tranquil state and clear of foreign elements, the person will reflect on the grandest and noblest ideas existing within the world of the mind. If we desire to think reasonably, we should allow reason to do its thinking within our brain. Still, if we attempt to be wiser than reason, our mind becomes filled with our own illusions, and those we have acquired from others. We cannot see the truth as it is, but we see it as we imagine it to be. This truth you will find symbolically or allegorically represented in all the world's principal mythologies and religious systems. Okay, I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. It is the old story of the fall of man. As long as humanity remained in a state of purity, that is to say, as long as will and imagination were identical to the will and imagination of the spiritual power acting within nature, they knew the truth and were all powerful. But when they began to think and to imagine in a way that was different from that universal power, they lost sight of the universal truth and could see only their own illusions. If a person wants to see the truth again, they must give up their own way of thinking and reasoning reason and let reason will and think in them. It, okay, I don't. I read that weird, but you get it. Uh, let me try one more. If a person wants to see the truth again, they must give up their own way of thinking and reasoning. They must give up their own way of thinking and reasoning, and let reason, will, and think in them. Okay, a little confusing that line. But you may think as well, ask a miser to give up the treasure which they have collected and hoarded during a lifetime as to ask a modern scientist or philosopher to give up their own way of thinking. That's kind of funny. A miser, I guess, because this book is like from, I think, the 1800s or something, or it was originally written in the 1800s. So hoarders have been around for a while, everybody. It's an old thing. Okay, let me just move that over. I see in your heart a desire to establish a reasonable society, but let me warn you that if you attempt to accomplish this by appealing to those who are clever and cunning, vainglorious and proud of their own attainments, full of ambition and anxious to come into possession of occult or magical powers to gratify their scientific curiosity, or to employ them for the fulfillment of some selfish desire, you will certainly fail. For it is written, Whosoever hath to him shall be given, and he shall have more in abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath. I know that quotation, I answered, but its meaning isn't quite clear to me. Me either. It means, replied Theodorus, that to one with a love of wisdom in their heart, abundant light will be given. But one who is filled with selfish desires will lose even what little understanding they have. I acknowledge, I said, uh, that I have been thinking of finding means to establish such a society or a school for spiritual development where those who desire to progress might be able to spend their energies for the purpose of that which is useful and lasting, instead of being forced to run after the illusions of the world. I have been mentally seeking a place in solitude where the members of such a society might lead an interior life. I should like to establish a theosophical monastery where we could live like you, surrounded by all the grandeur, sublimity, and stillness of nature, escape the servitude of fashionable society, and step on the path to adeptship. But surely, I couldn't think of selecting our members from the ranks of the uneducated and ignorant. Select them among those who are pure and virtuous, answered Theodorus, and your choice will be well made. Choose those who have overcome preconceived opinions and prejudices. Select them among those who have no desire to obtain knowledge for their own personal benefit, and do not wish to shine, but to let the light grow within themselves. Such persons are very rare. But if you find any, and if they join you in your efforts, you will soon have the most enlightened society in the world. That which is today called learning and education is merely a very laborious method of acquiring a little superficial knowledge which humankind is forced to adopt because they don't know how to develop their spiritual faculties. If this method were taught in practice, real knowledge would soon occupy the place of mere learning, certainty the place of belief, conviction the place of opinion, and true faith the place of creed. If every inhabitant of your proposed monastery had no way of willing and imagining their own, but if they all were living mirrors in which divine wisdom is reflected without any adulteration, such a monastery would be the greatest ornament of the world. Such centers of spiritual intelligence would be like suns of the first magnitude on the mental horizon of the world. One such center would be sufficient to illuminate the world with its wisdom and to send its intellectual rays to the utmost limits of the planet. And what is to hinder the establishment of such a center of intelligence, I ask? Nothing but human imperfections and the abundance of selfish desires, answered the adept. There are two sources from which the obstacles arise that are in the way of those who desire to attain self knowledge and immortality. One class of obstacles arises from the inferior self, and the other from external delusions. Uh, the other one from external conditions in which one lives. The internal obstacles are caused by one's acquired scientific or theological prejudices and misconceptions regarding the human constitution, and by the living elemental forces active within the animal principle and their constitution. As they are fed and grow strong by external influences, they manifest themselves in various ways, producing animal impulses. Combined with intellectual acquirements, they grow into the more dangerous class of vices, such as ambition, vanity, greed, intolerance, selfishness, etc. Of these animal elements or elementals may grow into intellectual but unreasonable being and finally constitute the ego. A human being may have many such egos until perhaps one of these overmasters the others and becomes a king in the realm of their soul. Each of these egos absorbs a share of the life and consciousness of the person whose soul exists, and may even occupy all the space within their intellectual sphere to paralyze reason or drive it away. The world is overcrowded with intellectual or semi-intellectual elements in human shape, in whom reason has been paralyzed to a greater or lesser extent. You see them in every day. You see them every day in the streets, in the pulpit, in the forum, in the halls of learning, as well as in the marketplace. A person's principal object in life should be to keep the realm of their mind free from such intruders, so that the king of reason may rule therein without being impeded. Their duty is to fight the Herculean battle with those animal and intellectual elements. With those animal and intellectual elementals, so that they will become servants of the king and not his masters. Can this be accomplished if all your energies are continually employed on the outward plane, if we are never at home within ourselves, if we are continually engaged with the illusions of life, either in the pursuit of sensual gratification or entirely absorbed in the so called intellectual pursuits, which tend to give us knowledge of outward things but convey no knowledge of self? Can we expect to accumulate our knowledge, our energy? Can we expect to accumulate our energy and employ it at the center within ourselves if we continually uh, spend it at the periphery? Can we hope to be able to waste all of our power and at the same time be able to retain it? An affirmative answer would be irrational as unscientific. An affirmative answer would be as irrational as unscientific. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. Been talking a lot.